Formulations, Neomaterialism with critic and curator Joshua Simon. And for those of you who don't yet own Neomaterialism, we actually have copies at SculptureCenter down the street. Sternberg Press is getting ready to do their second printing, so I think we have the last copies available for a little while, so I urge you to pick that up. And you can also check out our 4 exhibitions on view. We have 4 solo projects by Rosella Biscotti, Jumana Mana, David Duard, and Maarvon Figueroa. So I'm especially thrilled today that we are launching Joshua's book, not only because it's a fantastic project and speaks to our interests and concerns at SculptureCenter, but also because I had the pleasure of meeting Joshua in 2009 in Israel on an Artisan curatorial trip. And I vividly remember him discussing his formulation of the unready made. And I have been enthusiastically following the progress of his ongoing work on the object in contemporary art. And in 2011, Joshua published a 3-part essay in Intellect Journal, which comprised some of his research, and this was followed by the publication of Neomaterialism in 2013. Joshua has also curated a few exhibitions which have touched on the topics raised in his book, such as ReCoCo, Life Under Representational Regimes, which was co-curated with Siri Peyer, and Good, which was co-curated with Liz Hagag, among other curatorial and writing projects. Currently, Joshua is the director and chief curator at MoBY Museums of Bat Yam. He's also co-founding editor of Maayan Magazine, Maarvon Western New Film Magazine, and the New and Bad Art Magazine, all based in Tel Aviv-Jaffa. He was also a 2011-2013 fellow at the Vera List Center for Art and Politics at the New School, and is a PhD candidate at the Curatorial Knowledge Program at Goldsmiths College. Additionally, he's the editor of Solution 196-213, United States of Palestine-Israel, which was also published by Sternberg Press in 2011. I would also like to thank Nest Seekers for real estate, which kindly lent us the space for the talk today, and for generously supporting travel. I'd like to thank the Israel's Office of Cultural Affairs. So Joshua will speak for about 45 minutes, followed by a period of Q&A. And so it's now Joshua Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Uba, and thank you everyone for coming on this beautiful day. So I hope this will be worth spending an hour away from direct sunlight. I would like to thank, first of all of you for coming, and for the generous hospitality here at the SculptureCenter, for Uba and Marie, Stephen and Frederick. And I will talk about the book, Neomaterialism, which I do have a copy here, which to set it up, let's say, there are 2 very present conversations for the last few years in our world, the art world. One would be that of object-oriented ontology or speculative realism, and the other has to do with debt. So in many ways, the book attempts to bring them together, these 2 discourses. And I will try to present some ideas from the book in relation to this. And maybe a good way to start would be to show you a little video clip. This is falling down. Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but the story of the Transformers, the animation series, is based on a myth. The premise is a myth that precedes the story, and the myth is this: you used to have different another life form, extraterrestrial, and it exhausted the resources on its planet. Then they had to find a new planet to inhabit, and they were looking at planet Earth. And planet Earth looked attractive, but in order to inhabit it, they had to masquerade themselves as the species that's already there. And while looking at planet Earth, they thought that they realized in a way that the life form on this planet is cars. So they transformed themselves into cars. Later on came the Decepticons, and they transformed themselves into weapons mainly. So in a way, this is very true to where we are today, with, for example, countries like Germany that produce more cars than children. And I found this video of people. It's a yearly celebration of people becoming transformers. It's pretty nice, the costumes. Can you hear it okay? This is also a sound test. Okay? This is the most impressive one, Optimus Prime. And the abstract art exhibition, which is, I guess you know this chart very well from the cover of the catalog. And there are two things that I would like to will come up later on, and that is the relation between constructivism, which is here, and on the opposite side, Dada. Now, when we come to gestures in contemporary art, the two things suddenly find themselves together in an interesting way. And so, in this publication, there's this note that says, can you read it? As this volume goes to press, the United States Customs has refused to permit the Museum of Modern Art to enter as works of art 19 pieces of more or less abstract sculpture under a ruling which requires that sculpture must represent an animal or human form. Some of the 19 pieces are illustrated by figures da-da-da-da-da. They are all considered dutiable as plaster, bronze, stone, wood, etc., and have been entered under bond. The hand-painted paintings in the exhibition were, however, admitted free, no matter how abstract. And so you can see here there's a group of 19 pieces, some of them, even with this kind of daylight, you can recognize like classic futurist work and other. And so this is also a way to start the conversation about, let's say, artworks that, as much as they are perceived as such, and as much as they are that thing, artworks, at the same time they also resonate their material origin, or their qualities that come from their production, which precedes their artwork existence. And here, and this would be like a big kind of, this would be a way to enter this discussion. This is the Ghostbusters Ghost Trap. And I would like to propose this as the formulation of the commodity. Now, it seems today that we no longer talk of commodities, since we don't need to talk of commodities because everything is in a constant flow. We are aware that life itself has become a form of labor. So why bother going back to these, let's say, more physical manifestations of capitalism, of like the capitalist system? But the commodity is an interesting formulation because it opens up other options for us to actually engage with the objects, and I would say with the world. Now, the Marxist formulation of the commodity says something like, it goes along the lines of a materialization of our social relations. So this is a materialization of our social relations, and by that, of course, the ghost trap is a good object to explain this, being that all of us are in this. So not only the telephone or the microphone or the computer or the book are mediums, but actually this piece of, I don't know, maybe it's fake marble, maybe it's... So this is a medium. It's a medium for all the subjectivities that were part of making it. And if we think of creationism and Darwinism, which seem to be competing and contradicting, we can see how they are actually following the same scenario. By that I mean that the story of Genesis is a story of the 6 days of creation, in which you have, after God divided heaven from heaven and earth, you have different life forms that then culminate with man, with Adam and Eve. And with Darwinism, we have this image of, the amphibic life form all the way to the erected man. So you have different life forms going all the way up to the human. But with reincarnation, it's a different logic by which you can say that this thing has a subjectivity, and maybe it was reincarnated as this thing and vice versa, or this mountain has a spirit. Different let's say, there are different versions of ideas of reincarnation, but where it actually somehow, in a funny way, fits into the Marxist conception of the commodity. So, in a way, Marxist understanding of the thing has this, of the commodity has this spiritual reading of it. And what's nice about the way Marx describes the commodity is that, unlike what we're used to in, let's say, like a critical theory discourse, let's say to generalize it, it's not about secularizing. It's not like saying, you know what, you think this is so, it has such an effect that you're really drawn into this, but I'll show you the backstage, how they made it happen, right? This kind of idea of a critique of ideology, and we have it in many, many ways. Marx's description of the commodity is quite the opposite. What he's saying is, this might seem like a daily, like a mundane thing, but actually it's, as he's saying, full of theological niceties, and he even speaks of the table, saying that the table is such a mystical being that it's more mystical than any seance session you will do on it. On top of it is the English translation is like the Victorian term for seance, is table turning. So the translator was using the table and table turning, saying that being a table in a way is much more radical than table turning. Now I want to show you another video that has to do with this simple fact of how things come into the world. And going back to this ghost trap, they come to the world, nothing in the world was made by one person. There's no such thing. So like the idea of this medium, that this is made by people that didn't know each other, that come from different places. And so here Milton Friedman, I'll show you a piece from this series of presentations he gave at the beginning of the 1970s, the power of the market here on public television. It's kind of capitalist propaganda. And yeah, let's see how he formulates this.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was the magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more, to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
Beautiful. So this is an interesting thing is that the Marxist attempt to actually to present economy as the science of history was achieved. It was achieved by neoliberalism, and Milton Friedman already in the 1950s was in a way pushing for this, and we can see how in our lifetime economy moved from humanities to social science to science. And what's interesting about this science, of course, is that this is a science that cannot be refuted, which was a very common kind of accusation of a Marxist, presenting Marxism as a science was always saying, yeah, but your science, you can never refute it. Everything goes into this mechanism, and you can always say, it's class warfare, or this is alienation, and what this means is that actually we live, this is a theology. It's a science that cannot be refuted. Time and time again, reality presents totally different meanings, but nevertheless, we go back to the same models. But regardless of the fact that he's discussing the pricing system as this objective knowledge, that is the knowledge that combines all of our knowledges, which is kind of basic neoliberal economics, and Marxist formulation would have us discuss value and the way we generate value, and that value is then profit is extracted from the value that we generate. We can agree with him that no one person made one thing. And so with this in mind, I want to enter kind of the realm that we are in today. So 1913 is 100 years later this book came out, but 1913 is an important moment in modern industrial production with the introduction of the modern assembly line by Ford. And so by doing that, not only he was, first of all, made the work week shorter in a day, and still we live this way, 5-day work week. He also doubled, sometimes tripled the salaries in order for the workers to buy Model T, which was that car that they were working on the assembly line. So there is a dependency of production and consumption. That's why also you can understand how unions were so, well, in a way, then accepted more than today, still struggles all the time, but just because you had to maintain a surplus absorption through wage labor. That was the case then. But I want to show this 1936 Charlie Chaplin, of course, famous film, the Modern Times. I want to show the production taking place in the film, and that is, of course, the assembly line. So this is like a very heavy file, but the assembly line is this place where you're actually doing work, repeating movements, and you're doing just a tiny part of the whole production. So our concept of alienation, for example, comes from the fact that you're doing something and you don't know what you're doing. You can be building the bomb that will then fall on your house. That's the idea of alienation. You're doing one part of the production, and then you can meet the product outside in the market and you wouldn't even know. And in a way, the price is the manifestation of alienation, because you have to pay for this. Now, this comes out of a history of rationalizing production, which one of its beginnings would be the first encyclopedia, when Denis Diderot was going around to look how carpenters are making things and different artisans. He would ask them, but they didn't know how to describe it in words. They just knew how to do it. So what he decided to do was to try and do the things. And he was no expert in these things, of course, but in order to just explain, how do you make a table? How do you make saddles? I don't know. So since then, Diderot's attempt, of course, we have Taylorism and we have Fordism. These are forms of rationalizing production and making it more and more efficient. But what it also does is that it takes the expertise from the people who knew how to make things and makes it into protocols of production so that people would be following specific things along the assembly line. So doing the same manual kind of work time and time again. Now, I want to show you the other side of this equation. It happens already in minute number 9 in the movie, where they're experimenting with a feeding machine. Now here we enter, in a way, the logic under which we operate today. And 1929 was also a crisis of absorption of surpluses of production. So too many things are produced, not enough people are able to take them. And it's in this country there was a law that at the end was not approved, but it was proposed, of planned obsolescence, so that every object would have, let's say, a 5-year lifespan with this little ticket, and after 5 years you would have to hand it in to a government authority to dismantle it. So this will produce new work. Now, of course, we live with planned obsolescence, but now it's already part of the market. You don't need any, like he's saying, any commissar to make us do that. Whoever bought a printer ever knows how this works. So this other side of absorbing surpluses is extremely relevant for us, because you see how now this has become mainly the work that we do. So labor has shifted from production, where alienation is the category, to consumption. Labor is now mostly being performed in consumption, and there the category is different. The category is debt. So the object itself changes. I'll go further into that in a minute, but I just want to say that this actually makes us reevaluate what has happened after the Second World War with regards to what we perceive as a liberation movement. And by that I mean that after the Second World War, we had, after the Second World War, if we think of rock and roll, or if we think of feminism with all its endless horizons, and the civil rights movement, what they had to comply with was a logic that came out of the 1913 industrial capitalist logic, and that is that equality is access to the market. So the workers can also buy the Model T. But looking for new markets, now you have to franchise more publics. So first you have some kind of like a youth in the US, that's rock and roll. I mean, it offered much more, but at the end, that's the meaning of it. And then if you think of what happened with, again, with all its possibilities, what has happened with the proposal of feminism is that today it is the standard having a two-income household. And this is without resolving any of the questions of unpaid labor in the household, like in domestic work. So those problems were not resolved. It's just that now we have new problems. Women are thrown into a non-unionized labor market, and the question of what we call reproductive labor also has not been resolved. And now they're working for the household to be able to absorb surpluses that once it was enough to have one income to absorb them, because then it was unionized labor. I hope this makes sense. And then to give one more example, with the civil rights movement, you can see how, for example, with finance capital, that is in many ways simply trading of debt, once you bring in new publics through subprime mortgages, this is perceived as equality, but what it actually is people going into 40 years of debt. So debt has become this major thing that is actually a way to sustain an economy in which wages stagnate, but absorption of surpluses has to all the time escalate. And so throughout, parallel to the attack on organized labor, you see new mechanisms like the credit card, for example, in the late 60s and early 70s. Now this is not a status symbol, right? You would think someone has credit, he has a special card for it, right? Probably that used to be the case for people who with their signature, that was, that's my name, you trust me, you give me money, I'll pay you back. Now debt has become a way of, this is not my kind of bad character or anyone's bad character. This is what the economy is based on. So we are actually going into debt just in order to enter the employment market. So I want to show you this EU propaganda clip from 2009, celebrating 20 years to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And this video equates, in a way, issues of liberty and consumerism in an interesting way. Yeah. So what is liberty? It seems like it's the movement from analog to 5 megapixel camera to 12 megapixel to reflex plus cheap. That's what they are showing us. And in many ways, if you think of what the kind of politics of debt is about, and this is following the work of Joseph Vogel and of Maurizio Lazzarato, then you see Lazzarato says that debt is a time machine, meaning that you freeze power relations. You go into an installment plan for your telephone, and now for 4 years you're going to pay a sum. And of course, mortgage is the format for that, and it was made specifically to put people in a position where they are under private debt for 40 years, and in that way, the whole idea of unionized labor doesn't make sense because there's no solidarity there. I carry my own debt, no one else will carry it for me. And of course, you have totally different housing, let's say, formats for enabling housing for the population, but these were rejected along the years for this project. So what we're actually facing is that whenever we say change, we actually mean debt. Like if you upgrade your phone, you're going into debt. And if you think even here in this country, the campaign of the current president in 2008 under this word change, what it actually amounted to was also a bailout right after he was elected. This has to do with questions of sovereignty that maybe we can go into later, but I want to move on into to see some artworks, and before that, just some of the work that actually informed the writing of the book. And so I mentioned Joseph Vogel. He's working with the concept of speculation, and what he's saying is that speculation is the future taking hostage all the rest of the time. All other time formats are taken hostage by something called the future, and speculating on debt, that's finance. And so in relation to debt, this is work by an Israeli artist, Roy Rosen. It's called Loser's Monopoly, and it's a good way to describe our life, although our life has, the board always expands. There are more parts of your life that now enter the board game, and that whenever you're there, you have to pay rent. And you see how this is a term that is used, becoming rental profit. By that also what we would call technological innovation is actually different ways of licensing. So iTunes or Microsoft, these are operations that what you're actually doing is paying them rents. And if you add to this, again, health, transportation, housing, education, all these things that supposedly your taxes were supposed to give you those in order for you to enter the employment market, now you pay them as life taxes in order to get into the employment market. Now a little, let's say, let's go back to 1913. This is how a Woody Guthrie song begins. Let me take you back to 1913. Yes. So this is 1917, but 1913, parallel to Henry Ford's modernized assembly line, Marcel Duchamp exhibits the first ready-made. It's the bicycle wheel on the stool. And so, in a reality in which no one person can claim authorship, because each one was doing just one little thing, and Henry Ford he writes down every little thing that you need to do along the assembly line and how many limbs you need. So apparently to make a car, only 4 elements in the production of a car require you to have enough force to lift heavy objects. And several you can do, like several actions you can do with just one hand, and several you can do with no legs. He really writes this down, so he's actually chopping off the human body as he's thinking of production. And so in this reality, in which no one person can claim authorship for an object, comes someone like Marcel Duchamp and says, look, I didn't produce this, I didn't design this, I maybe didn't even buy it, maybe I got it as a present from the Baroness. But by exhibiting it through display, we can start a discussion about authorship. And this is, of course, the beginning of a very long conversation that we have until today in relation to conceptual art and appropriation, but we can also see it as the last gesture of authorship, because after this, if you look at the literature that has been accumulating, you have author's producer, you have death of the author, you have Deleuze's individual, and so maybe Duchamp is also, this idea of the ready-made also presents us with a limit to that concept, a limit to that concept of authorship. Now, this is taking place in relation to industrial capitalism. Now, when we think of finance capital, and we think of the notion of debt, here it's a different reality. And now I'm showing you a project by an Italian-American artist based in France, Francesco Finizio, who did in 2008, really parallel to Lehman Brothers. Really, it's like the fall of 2008. He took this corner shop in Bordeaux that afterwards became a gallery. And as you can see, he was using the same objects for different businesses. And this is called How I Went In and Out of Business in 7 Days and 7 Nights in 2008. So what you have here is a totally different relation to objects. They are collaborators, he works with them. It's less a question of appropriation and more maybe of dispossession. And I will show maybe works that even go further with this idea of dispossession. But definitely on going back to this Alfred Barr chart, many of these things might look like ready-mades, but they're actually following the logic of constructivist, let's say, sensibilities and relations to, and the relation to objects. And this, in the book, is kind of, the proposal there is named the unready-made. So if the ready-made has to do with taking something from the world and valorizing it as art, something that only an artist can do, because a curator, for example, he might take something from the world, but he would extract something from it. So that would be an African mask or a mural that they had ritual meaning, but the curator would say, but I'm interested in its artistic meaning. So that would, this here, of course, I'm following Boris Groys with this formulation. And the artist is the one able to valorize something that just comes from the world, and that is the ready-made. But with the unready-made, what you're doing is you're working within the context of the exhibition, okay, of like of the exhibition, and working with post-appropriation display strategies by which you are actualizing the commodity nature of the thing. And by commodity, again, I'm not only thinking of commodification of something brought into the market, because it was in the market before it was an artwork, right? I mean, you see here these different objects. Now at a certain point, he would make, and he didn't show yet, right, the art gallery. So these blankets that are now used for a peep show will then become paintings. So it was already, in a way, a commodity before it became an artwork. And there's a famous saying by an Israeli artist who is also present here, Efrat Kedem, whose work I'm going to show, that artworks begin with shopping or with picking up stuff that other people shopped and just left outside. Here, this is the art gallery. So, but describing this as actualizing the commodity nature of the object, I mean also the other side of the commodity, and that is this ghost trap. So there is a frequency going through display that is able to bring the whole world here. Like I was saying, the whole world is here with this piece of piece of fake marble, because all the people and all the everybody's here with us in a way. It's like this the Navi tree in Avatar. It's very spiritual. So we just finished watching Francesco's display. Now this is the mini golf, which is also very nice. I think the last one is coming soon. Now this was done for 10 days, for 7 days and 7 nights, and then when the exhibition opened, you had all the objects lined up next to the wall. This was a slideshow, and they had credits, so they would have like post-its in which scene they were playing what. So the boxes were playing a table or benches in that part, or this part, in this installation, or that installation. So this is how this project worked. Now I move on to something that maybe is more, let's say, recognizable aesthetically. And here I'm showing you work by no longer Detroit, but originally from Detroit, Mike Smith, an American artist. And these are really nice unready-made, in the sense that in the last 15 years we've been exposed to what we can call MFA art. One of its formats is these assemblages that are really unready-made. So they are gestures of dispossession. I'm showing you something and I have no idea what this is. This just came from the world. Let's start a conversation. I don't know where this is coming from. It's maybe like the Transformers was saying, the life form here is something else and we're just caught in between. This kind of sensibility. And so Mike's work in a way is really, in a way, can open this kind of, discussing this kind of genre of like banana on laptop and things like that, where you have a cell phone inside a glass bowl full of water and then half a styrofoam ball painted in black. And of course, it has also a mood to it. It's melancholic. It's deserted. It has there is affect here. But also, I want to show you the work of Fat Kedem, where she's doing these assemblages of things that she found. So these things then follow her, and they are made into other works later on. So this is named after a street corner that she found this table in the boxes, Herzl and Yedidia Frenkel, that's in Tel Aviv. And then she put this handle in, and this is a very nice, it's called a statue of the anonymous secretary, where she raided an office of an office building that was just being evacuated. And and this, of course, already you can see follows a constructivist, more like constructivist aesthetics. But this MFA art, these unready-mades that have been present in so many places in the last 15 years, they of course have to do with the life experience of those people making the work. And that is MFA students with the debt that they're in. And so one could say even that as much as this would look maybe shoulder-shrugged, apolitical work, of just showing stuff, this we can read as a rehearsal for the barricade. And by the barricade, I mean like a very actual thing, a thing that is working with gravity, So gravity is a force that even the transformers they have to comply with. That's the force that brings us all together. Us, I mean, those are considered humans, and non-humans, organic, non-organic, right? This would be, in a way, the most inclusive social contract on Earth, gravity. And even satellites comply with this logic. So even when they were 1957, Sputnik, first man-made object to be put outside the atmosphere, one of the great things we should thank the Soviet Union for. It is still part of the logic of gravity. But capital works differently. So this is a project by two British artists, Heather and Evan Morrison, from 2009, where they built a one-day barricade in Wellington, New Zealand, in this art festival in New Zealand. And if you look closer, you can see that somehow we can recognize, like that group photo of objects that the US Customs were holding, you can recognize here also some assemblages that are familiar from exhibitions from, I don't know, the Monumental Show, before that and after that. And it was December 12, 2011, when the west coast of this country, there was a thing called Occupy the Ports. And these are images documenting Occupy the Ports. This is one, this is another. Where you had people piling up stuff in order to keep away other stuff from coming in. So actually halting this process of absorbing surpluses. Again, this, and then now look at the Heather and even more so. It's just the barrel is putting it together. And maybe before finishing the presentation, just to explain a bit more about this status of the unready-made, I want to show you the last image from Jean-Luc Godard's 2 or 3 Things I Know About Her. Now, this is a film that takes place in a neighborhood that's a newly built neighborhood, 67. It's all high-rises, apartment buildings. It's the banlieue. It's like it's not really suburbs, but it's the projects, let's say. And this is the last image. So it comes after you all the time seeing these different boxes that people live in. So on the one hand, this would be a model of the neighborhood, right? All these packages. At the same time as this is a model, this is actually documenting litter. Now you just see stuff on the lawn. And this double status of the thing when it's exhibited as both a model and just stuff from the world, that's a good way to describe the unready-made. And I would like to just finish with a video that I found by Israeli movers, and I realized that they were actually really next to where I lived. And here, let's see this. This is really a relation to objects that is quite remarkable. So these are movers. This is Betzalel Street in Tel Aviv. So these are people who every day have to work with things, right, to carry them.
Piano, I can to play.
cheese, 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 cheese. Natan, cheese. With ease.
Что, Dada? Ставишь назад? Да. Да, стой, назад, назад. Ничего не трогай. Не трогай, давай, давай, я тебя помогаю.
So I was putting back the piano in the truck and look what it's doing. He's reaching for the guitar. Oh, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Going back to one of your first examples of when the sculptures were trying to get in, they were kind of misrecognized as so much stuff, so much material, not as kind of sculpture as such. Are you kind of suggesting in a sense that the customs people actually got it right in a sense? Because as I trace your narrative, the idea of sculpture kind of drops out. The stuff, the junk, or whatever it is, right? It could be anything to build the barricade. The material seems to become your primary area of interest. So I was just wondering if you could sketch out the customs get it right, or what happened with sculpture.
Did everyone hear the question? The question was regarding the image at the beginning with the customs, the Alfred Barr show, and whether the customs were getting it actually right. That, I mean, this is my point, that the customs were getting it right, that before it has like an artwork, that there is, the material has a presence prior to the sculptural nature of the object. Let's say, in order not to answer, I would say, I would use the term kitsch. And this is not in the kind of a Greenbergian tradition, but Walter Benjamin's formulation of kitsch, when he writes about surrealism, is very interesting because he's saying, well, kitsch is something, following Marxist logic, that has lost its use and exchange value. And what you're left with is a pure sentimental value. And garbage is that. It's pure sentimental value. And those who are able to sell, following the idea of the ghost trap, and those who are able to, let's say, now this sounds very romantic or heroic, but you know, either salvage or even just recycle, okay, that sentimental value, those who are able to do that are those who are making sculptures now, these kind of sculptures. So that would be a kind of a way to try to answer, to follow your question, but not to answer, you know, if they were right and then, you know, I don't know, the curator was wrong. It's, yeah, I hope this was.
Joshua, how do ethics enter into this formulation? We're looking at materials and objects that artists are using to make their work, which are maybe less situated in this translation from context, but actually carrying with them this labor, this network of labor conditions. How do you see that entering into a consideration of contemporary artwork from the perspective of ethics?
The perspective of ethics, I would say, you know, you have, for example, the ideas here, they are not so much following let's say, environmentalist logic, which has become our imagination in many ways, simply because following a Marxist analysis, we have to discuss, let's say, in the broader sense, social justice, and out of that, we will come up also with the other justices. Exactly a formulation that does not follow this is that of equality as access to the market. which we live in, and so every let's say, struggle, time and time again, when we have struggles, somehow they find themselves having to equate equality with the access to the market, and and I would even say that this is also within like environmental understanding of the world we live in. I can give maybe an example from, so parallel to the debt economy, parallel to these manifestations of unready-made, we have for the last 20 years, let's say, a real popularity of organic food, and also conspiracy theories. Now, I have a way to combine all this together. I won't trouble you with this, but I just talk about transparency, okay? What Whole Foods kind of sells you is transparency. So it's not like, you know, this Melvina Reynolds song, An Alchemist's Nightmare, when she talks about processed food, like you look in the back and it's like an alchemist's nightmare, there are all the ingredients. So no, you go to Whole Foods and they tell you, no, this isn't 100% orange. But, and this is the Marxist term, this is not transparency because you don't know how to grow an orange. You have to pay for the orange. So now if someone knows how to grow oranges, it means that you also know, because this is shared knowledge that we all know somehow. And this is the one thing that we don't discuss when we discuss organic food, or that you have to pay for it. So actually using when you pay for something, you're actually paying for the fact that you're impoverished. You lack the knowledge. That's why you have to pay. So I would say this is a way to discuss, the ethics of organic food, of our attempt to find, transparency in the food court, and transparency, political transparency, these attempts to have direct democracy in the encampments, in the Occupy movement. They relate to this, while I think lack kind of, or not lack, they can also follow a kind of a Marxist analysis that would bring very different strategies to operate.
Hi. I'm wondering, though, beyond Whole Foods' seemingly transparent walls, you can take your notion of the unready-made and take it back to another space that usually has transparent storefront, which is the gallery. And I'm wondering if the way that you formulate the unready-made, we talk about the sham and the ready-made, I'm wondering about the relations between the unready-made and the ready-made, and what happens to the object when it is inserted into the logic of the gallery, when it comes into the gallery world.
First of all, thank you for this question. The kind of the way that it's narrated, that it's told in the book, is that the commodity precedes the artwork. So that it's not so much a question of the art market, of how something comes into the world as this authentic thing, and then it's being corrupted by a market. We live in a world that this thing exists because it's a commodity to begin with. I mean, the materials that are made, like a Cézanne is also the canvas and the frame. I don't want to go there. It's not, you can't reduce it to that, but I'm just saying that it is the commodity that is the precondition for the artwork. And this actually makes me think of how there are, let's say, ways in which we negotiate value within our practice of the art world, let's say, that drawn to our world other projects. And here, this is, the formulation was made by David Graeber, like this fascination that we have, for example, by Spiegelgasse, this little narrow street in the old city of Zurich, where you had Cabaret Voltaire, and at the same time Lenin was living on the same street just before moving, doing the revolution. And you have Trotsky and Diego Rivera, and you have these meet, and of course you have constructivist art. You have like artists and revolutionaries shoulder to shoulder. And this is to answer your question, to say that where he comes up with kind of a formulation where he says, yes, revolutionaries, they wanna experiment with new values in order to implement these in reality. What artists are doing is they're using the current existing reality to, again, simulate, model, negotiate different values. So there is a point where we work, when we can work together, and then our professions take us in different paths. So that might be an answer to you.
To go back to the oranges analogy, I feel like I'm maybe missing something in terms of the generalization of the statement that paying for oranges would mean that you're impoverished and incapable of making them, and that if someone were to take money out of it as a medium of exchange, like if someone were, this is a classic example of like someone making apples and oranges, and they're both farmers are making apples and oranges, then they'd realize that they can more efficiently make apples and oranges if they do them separately and then trade, then they have this surplus of oranges that they'll sell on the market. But theoretically, just in the analogy, the person who chooses to produce only apples and trade for the oranges could always go back to making oranges. They have that knowledge, and so I just feel like the analogy is like...
So this is a whole conversation about money, which is always a nice thing. Maybe I'll do it through like a biblical story, okay? Book of Genesis, you have Cain and Abel. And so Cain is killing Abel. Now this is a story that condenses, from a Marxist perspective, the concept, okay, this is not theory, this is a concept in the sense that we're trying to figure out through, let's say, a story, what was going, like the transitions in society. So this is the concept of the move from a nomad society with no private property to settlers with private property. Cain, the killer, is a farmer, and Abel is a shepherd. So Abel, he's the one who's killed. He's the one who represents the old civilization, and Cain is the one who is in this new civilization of private property. And of course, this is a story of what we call primitive accumulation. Now, this is privatization also. This is like the logic we are in today. So, colonization is one of its manifestations. So people live off the land. You come in, you tell them, okay, this land is not yours anymore, you have to work to get money in order to pay for just living here. So now they have to leave the knowledge that they had, forget about it, do construction work or something else for the colonizer, and then to pay for the things that the generation before they knew how to do. When we think of all these life taxes of privatization, we see how we are also in the same condition. And today, to the extent that everything is supposed to be in the money economy, so that if you have morning shows on TV, where they bring in people that were able to come out of traumatic experiences or out of severe health conditions, they were being interviewed on TV because they were able to make it into a business. They were able to make family relations, like, I don't know, I saw on TV once a mom that was helping her kids with their spelling. Once this was enough as parents. Now you have to put a website on with your technique and to have people subscribing to it, because this is what you're supposed to do. And so that's the colonization of privatization, of entry, of bringing everything into the money economy that impoverishes us from our knowledges. I hope this.
I have a question related to the film that you showed with the Berlin Wall, and of the Berlin Wall, where actually it was just happened at the end as a result, and it only became such a powerful meme because visually, and I'm very interested in the phenomenon of this meme of the Berlin Wall because it was a sexy idea of actually something falling, something that's actually physically has fallen, and I was interested in how like this object falling, this performative aspect of it, created in me that as a result, when it's circulating, like when I'm talking to kids at school who are learning about the fall of the Berlin Wall, they actually think that the communism and the totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe, they kind of ended in Berlin. Whereas it was just the onset of it, and it gave the name to the phenomenon. But so in a way, like the perception of this, like in Eastern Europe, that we kind of became dispossessed of our own, the phenomenon of our own making, because ultimately the meme that is circulating, and probably in 50 years, people, when they will be talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall, they will be, okay, the fall of the Berlin Wall, so Berlin, and yeah, not like Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, and so on. I was wondering if you were thinking about this, because it's kind of like a beautiful example of this dispossessed object from the workers, but like on a kind of higher level.
Thank you for this, because actually you can think of the Berlin Wall as exactly this blockage that then capital, is able to break through. That's kind of the image. And what happens is, like you're saying, people, the history is taken from them, it's a form of colonization. Other things could have happened. A week before the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was a famous rally at in Alexanderplatz with beautiful quotes by Heiner Müller. It wasn't the only scenario. And by the way, 1989 is when Deleuze writes the afterword